Agile project management is really now, pretty much the standard way that we work in the tech environment. But the question is, how do we then roll that out through other environments where we still take the best of Agile, but also make it applicable for maybe more traditional type businesses? And for those that have worked with us before, we've had an 8-step cycle for managing a project that's really stood very, very solid for probably the best part of 30 years. But what we wanted to do was evolve that now to embrace some of this Agile thinking and give you some clues into how you might take some of that best practice into your more traditional business. So at the core of the new 8-step cycle is the notion that one team, and this is very much something that came out of the Agile movement, that one of the problems with old-fashioned project management was it was very much a waterfall effect, where the project would move through phases and often move through the hands of different people. The problem with that, of course, is the people that were being handed off to had no involvement in the early phases, so they weren't up to speed. They often would make mistakes because they didn't know all the details. So being able to have a single team that runs through the project start to finish is a really, really powerful concept to take forward with you. Probably the thing I'd say there is don't feel that everyone's got to be involved in its, in every little part of what's going on. But I think having them together as a team so they all know what's happening, and accepting that as the project moves forward, people will play greater and lesser roles, but they're still part of the team is probably the way to think about that. Once you've got that one team philosophy, the other part we wanted to put inside the new 8-step cycle is some of those Agile philosophies that we think are universal. And that's the notion that there needs to be great communication, there needs to be deep critical thinking, which I'll touch on again in a second, but also this notion of ceremony. And in the Agile world, what they mean by ceremony is like, what are those checks and balances that we have? What are those meetings? Scrums is a common word you'll hear used. What do we do to kind of come together and say, where are we, what progress have we made, what's working, what's not working, what do we focus on next? That kind of ceremony is really, really important. And if you put that communication around that ceremony, and then the empowerment for people to go and do what they need to do, and then bring in some critical thinking instead, which again, I said I'll touch on in a second, it comes out, I think, a really powerful Agile process. So now just to focus on the core 8 steps. So some of these are similar to we've had in the past with some slight tweaks. We've gone step 1, we now talk about project value rather than project brief. I think part of the project value is creating a brief, but how do we really at the very beginning become very, very clear about the value we're trying to drive from this project? Because if we're not clear on that, it's very, very easy to drift off into different places where we're doing things that aren't going to add value to what we're trying to achieve. So having a real focus on what the project value is and that we're pinning everything back to is really, really critical. Then we need to think about the now analysis. So this hasn't changed from our previous model, but stopping and taking some time, and this is, I suppose, where critical thinking starts to kick in, to understand where are we now, what's the analysis of our current state, if you wanted to use that language. So we're really, really clear about our current realities, as good or bad or brutal as they may be, is a really powerful exercise to do, and actually highlights out many of the issues, challenges, problems we're having, which will be a key part of proving a business case later on. The next thing to do then, and this is again to stop us jumping to solutions, which I think is part of the problem with where we get to in projects, is before we do anything, let's put our rose-tinted glasses on and talk about where we'd want to be. What's our where analysis? What's our ideal state, if you want to use that language? So before we start getting into sort of restrictive thinking about what isn't possible, what would be the perfect outcome? And then that enables us then to put alongside any data that we may have. It could be, could be very, very objective data. It might be more subjective. It doesn't matter. But it enables us to look at that data and then start to think about what could be a solution that we're calling MVP, but not in a minimal viable product way, a minimal valuable product, or if you're just in a project mode, minimum viable progress that we want to make forward to move us towards where we're trying to get to. So all of that piece there is about critical thinking, and it's about, let's not jump in and start doing stuff. Let's stop and think and understand where we are, where we need to get to, what the data is telling us, and what might be something we can build or we could look to do that would move us forward without running around just kind of trying to work it out and implement it at the same time, which we know is one of the big dangers of running a project. Once you've done that, obviously putting some kind of plan together makes sense. If you can bring that into a business case, so you can actually almost, now you've done that thinking, go, is there still a business case for this? Because it isn't uncommon to get to that stage and go, actually, we thought this would be really valuable, but now we've done some analysis on this, maybe it isn't, and better to stop there than to spend the next 2 years finding that out after lots of work and wasted resource. And then obviously then you move into implementation, and then you learn and refine as you go along, because we know it's not going to be perfect. And I suppose the key then to that piece there, and to keep this kind of agile, is feedback loops are really, really critical. So in a modern agile world, as we're progressing forward, at any one of these 8 points, we should be all asking the question, what does that tell us about linking back to our project value? Is it still in line with our project value, or have we learned something here that tells us we need to change something within our brief, or that actually we're off track, or this isn't worth doing anymore? So having that continual feedback loop from any of these stages into project value is a really powerful way to stay agile and not get stuck on a track down a road that you don't want to go to. So hopefully that's a way to start to think about some of these agile processes. It's similar to our old 8-step model, but with some tweaks and with some additions of some of those agile principles. And good luck with your journey.